Generals, gentlemen.
Hello and welcome back to StarCraft, Heart of the Swarm. I am Orange Machine and I'm joined with my good friend Sybert. How are we this fine evening?
Not doing too bad, but of course it's afternoon. I don't know why you'd say evening. It's not like it's 2 a.m. for you or anything.
Which technically isn't evening either. Evening is like, sort of after afternoon, but not quite night. So I guess that wasn't appropriate for either one of us. I'm not sure why I said that. I'm sorry, but that's okay, because on the top left we do have Exiled 5 Army is his new team, no longer of Ascension Gaming, and he is against...
In the bottom right position, spawning as the red Protoss, it is Frustration.
So this is game number 2 of Army vs Frustration for the ACL qualifiers, and last game we saw a pretty intense match. It was a 45-minute game, very late game sort of playstyle from these two Protoss players. It was actually pretty nuts seeing how they would kind of deal with their army compositions, the Nexus sniping, the sort of wonky engagements. So hopefully we'll see some pretty crazy sort of stuff like that in this second game.
Yeah, I mean, Frustration really being quite frustrating to Army in that last game. I had to say it. But it looks like we do have... Okay, so he is going to be scouting out. It looks like Frustration is like, hey, are there any pylons here? Am I being cannon rushed? That's what he wants to know. And I think that actually, yeah, Frustration is going to be doing the exact same thing. He's like, wait a second, are you going to be cannon rushing me? Should I know about this?
Yeah, it is a thing in PvP.
He just wants to make sure that there's nothing too crazy.
Cannons are always a thing indeed, especially as they do get desperate here. Frustration throwing down his Cyber Core, Army doing the same. Actually, not yet. Not just yet. Actually, Frustration
He's
getting...
going to be going for gas.
Yeah, Cyber Core before second gas, not something you see a lot. Army going for his double gas before Cyber Core. So that's, usually what you see.
Frustration going to be adding on that Zealot quite rapidly, and his probe is going to be moving out. So what exactly is his plan going to be? Is he just going to be going for the passive scout, or is he going to be going for something a bit more sinister? I honestly don't know.
We will have to see. Chronoing out that warp gate, so he may go for some pretty aggressive play here. Not only is his Cyber Core a fair bit faster than Army's, but chronoing out his warp gates will give him that really aggressive power if he goes for it. So he may try and land some proxy pylons here. We see one from Army near that southern Nizonaga tower, so I'm not really sure what's going on here, but we are seeing both a Mothership Core and a Twilight Cancel from Army, so he may be going for DTs again, as he did in that last game.
Yeah, of course, DT is good in any matchup, but particularly when your opponent is going to be adding on 2 gateways, and of course researching Warp Gate. But I mean, yeah, that probe does get eyes on both of those gateways, so potentially Army is just like, oh, good. He's going to be very excited.
Frustration throwing down another chrono boost onto the gateway, the warp gate, so he's going to get it out pretty damn fast. Army is doing the same, but there's still a pretty big difference between the two. There is a pylon here for Frustration on that northern Zonaga tower, and actually getting another pylon near the natural base of Army, so he could go for a very aggressive playstyle. But if Frustration has no DTs, he may have to back right off home. With no detection, he can't really repel anything, but actually pushing up the ramp, Zealot, Probe, and a Stalker, another pylon in the main base actually, so pretty deadly, but that Mothership Core will bring a bit of firepower, not quite having enough for the Photon Overcharge, actually getting taken pretty low by the Stalker. Will he lose it? Looks as though the Stalker from Army will kind of turn the tides there. That Stalker's pretty damn low. Can he kite it? The Zealot's almost getting it, running through the probes, and he is microing that very well. Will actually... Oh, he lost it though! Ooh. Bad micro, did get the Photon Overcharge. Now these Stalkers are moving in Frustration. He needs to snipe it down, but he's losing Stalkers. Army not quite losing enough probes, getting a couple of them sniped now. Hasn't lost any yet, but they're getting pretty low. That's a very, very nice defense from Army.
Yeah, so going for the 3 gateways, well, rather warp gates, and of course the Dark Shrine did get spotted, or I'm assuming it did get spotted, as Frustration did definitely have vision of it. Did he actually click on it to see what it was?
Oh, man.
Quite possibly. And that Stalker actually getting trapped by the Twilight Council. That is very unfortunate. But I'm not actually sure. Did those 3 warp gates really pay off? I'm not entirely sure. It looks like they may not have.
Doesn't look like it, especially because now we're going to see a DT coming out very soon for Army. It's already on the field, but actually not going into his base, going into that southern pylon there. He will see these stalkers. Oh, actually, maybe not. I don't think he saw it, but he will move into the base. Doesn't look like there is any detection. Oh, just kidding. Here comes the observer, chronoed out very fast. Nice sentry there. Very nice timing. Actually gets the force field off beforehand. And these stalkers from Army will sort of clear out this wave of pylons. So investing quite a fair bit in the pylons is what Frustration did. I don't think it paid off. We'll snipe down that DT. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting game. Not really sure who's actually above.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I definitely don't know enough to just sort of make that call at this point. But they both have done some fair damage to each other. These pylons are going to be a nice pickup for Army, and it does actually supply block Frustration there. I mean, he's got another pylon on the way, so he's not going to be too heavily supply blocked, but he's going to have to add on an additional pylon again. So yeah, those proxy pylons, a little bit annoying for Army to be taking them out. A little bit annoying for Frustration, I should say, that Army took those out. But of course, the Nexus is going to be on the way. The natural expansion for both of these players, it is going to be slightly ahead for Army, but nothing too crazy.
Frustration chronoing out his +1 on that forge, +1 weapons. So one thing I want to mention, this is probably the very first time I have ever seen Army get his Nexus out before Frustration. I have seen quite a fair bit of matches of Frustration versus Army, as they're pretty much like the two best players in Perth. Army has moved on to Melbourne, unfortunately. But I've seen a lot of games, and this is actually the first game Army has his Nexus first. So this is a very interesting dynamic I haven't quite seen just yet. So Army may win the Makara game. He still is a little bit behind in supply, but still is above in probe, and that's pretty important.
Yeah, Zealot going to be getting picked off there, so he didn't get the scout off that he was probably looking for. Frustration, that is, didn't get quite the scout off that he was looking for. And of course, the Colossus going to be added on for Army. He did get that robotics bay, but I don't think he has actually got Thermal Lance just yet. He was likely going to be adding that on pretty soon here, but for now, he's just going to be going for the Colossus, while Frustration is going to be going for the Immortals. And +1 ground should be finishing up pretty soon here for both of these players.
That Warp Prism must have been scouted by the pylon of Frustration, but Frustration's actually moving out his stalkers. They were in the ideal position to intercept that Warp Prism. Now they are backing off, marching down, maybe to do a bit of harassment on that natural of Army. But Army's Warp Prism is in a very nice position to harass. He can warp in DT, so this could be very effective. But there are two photon cannons in that mineral line, so Army has to be careful here as his +1 does finish. +1 weapons finishes, going for the +1 armor now. DT from Army will sort of deny that pylon there, but actually maybe not, because of those stalkers are moving in just in time. But oh, almost gets it.
Yeah, he did just miss it. In the main base, we do have a Zealot. Actually, 2 Zealots going to be getting warped in for Army, so he's going to be looking to do a little bit of damage, but with that cannon there, these Zealots, with those 2 cannons there, yeah, those Zealots did pretty much nothing.
Phoenix Scout will get a bit of an idea of the Colossus, but actually looks like Frustration may just march into the base here. It's a nice wall of warp gates there, going to try and block off some of the units, but 2 Immortals, a handful of Sentry Zealots, actually, oh, they were only Colossus, but actually they're moving in. That force field doing a bit of blocking, but not really a lot. As I was saying, yeah, the Colossus were only the hallucinations, so quite deceiving.
Yeah, I mean, force fields for Frustration, they're not going to be super important as long as the Colossi are there to go ahead and crush them down. But, I mean, they potentially can be disrupting those Stalkers a little bit. Not too big of a deal, or it shouldn't be too big of a deal. The Warp Prism is just going to be sort of sitting over that, in between the natural and the main base. Will maybe get taken out. No, he does not get spotted there, as he is able to escape on away from Frustration's base. So going to be picking up and leaving there. A slight worker lead for Frustration. He's actually almost at 50 workers thus far, looking to potentially add on a 3rd base.
Frustration going for Blinkstalker, throwing down 2 more gateways. So I'm still not sure if Army actually realizes that those Colossus were hallucinations, because he scouted another one with the Warp Prism, and this may sort of throw his game off if he tries to counter these Colossus that don't actually exist, because we are seeing a fair bit of gateways and a bit of an upgrade lead a little bit faster for Frustration, so he may just go for a pretty powerful gateway army supported by those Immortals.
Yeah, once again, Frustration does have that ground armor, so he is going to be, it's already completed for him. Army is going to be trying to catch up in that regard. We do have a couple of proxy pylons going to be getting thrown down by Frustration. However, third base is on the way for Army and is going to be added on right there. The Nexus does begin for Frustration as well. So they're going to be looking to be fairly even economically. But are they actually? Yes, they are actually almost completely even in terms of income. Neither one of them has a huge advantage. The Hallucinated Phoenix is going to be getting the Scout off. Such a smart move that players have been doing for quite a while now, just hallucinating lots of units. You can really trick out your opponent, and then of course getting off that Scout is pretty much invaluable.
Frustration going for his Dark Shrine may do some harassment. As we saw last game, the DTs are just so good for sniping down Nexuses because of the huge DPS, and basically the fact that they of course are cloaked. So Army here had to rebuild his Twilight Council for those Zealot charge. Unfortunately, having to force fire it down. But force fire rather is a CNC term. How dare we use CNC terms around here? He had to A-click his Twilight Council, rebuilding it. Bit of a blunder there. Sets him back about, I think it's 100 gas. So not exactly ideal, but not a huge deal either. Phoenix will get another scouting information. He sees everything that Army has 3 Colossus. Something pretty important to get a read on.
Yeah, spotting those Colossus numbers, and of course, for Army, he is going to be going for his Colossus, but he's a lot heavier Immortal focused for that. The Phoenix once again going to be getting the full Scout off, or at least as much of the Scout as he can, but the Photon Cannon should be able to deal with that without too much trouble. And now Army is going to be moving out to the middle of the map. Frustration does hold one of the Xel'Naga watchtowers. I'm not sure if he actually does see the Colossus, yeah, so he's going to be spotting this Army quite easily. Is he going to be moving out to engage with it? The terrain actually going to be splitting up the army of Army a fair bit there. Those Stalkers were out of position, but Frustration wasn't able to do anything with it. And I mean, in total, they're not too crazy in terms of difference for Army supply. So this engagement could be coming down quite closely, but Colossus advantage versus Immortal advantage. Which one of these players is going to be getting the better positioning to do more damage? We may be finding out in just a couple of seconds here, as Army is going to be coming in here, and the Zealots are going to be rushing to the front lines here. The Immortals going to be doing huge amounts of damage to them. The Force Field's going to be splitting up the army of Frustration a fair bit there, and really that Time Warp going to be freezing a lot of these Immortals. The Force Field's actually trapping some of the Immortals there with the Zealots. However, the Photon Overcharge does go down. Army is going to be driven back. He may be able to hit the third base location. He doesn't actually know that it exists, but his Mothership Core is currently going to be getting left out in the middle of the map. He definitely needs to make sure that he keeps that with his army and takes it back home.
During that engagement, oh wait, we're going to lose that. That's a bit of a blow there. During that engagement, there was actually several Zealots warped into the base of Frustration. He didn't really do a lot though, because the cannons were quite powerful, basically delayed them long enough, only killing a handful of probes, so that didn't really pay off as much as I thought it was going to. Army sniping down some of these pylons, always very crucial. There's a pylon from Frustration right near the third base of Army, and that could be incredibly important there for not only sniping the third base, but also the fourth, which is being dropped down now from Army. Both players getting the +3 ground attack weapons, but it looks as though Frustration has a pretty scary army here, marching into, well, the middle of the map, but Army's army is actually going, we deny that fourth. That's pretty important there.
Yeah, a couple of Dark Templar in the third base of Frustration. They are going to be able to work down the Nexus a little bit here. A single Zealot is going to be rolling up, but will the Archons and the Stalkers be able to actually do enough damage? The Nexus is getting dangerously low. Does he have absolutely no detection? He may very well, and the Force Field's narrowly saving that Nexus. 38 HP. The shields will begin to regen, but that was so close for Frustration. Just losing that third base would have been absolutely terrible.
Yeah, it was a bit of a miss micro there. Army could have had that, but he actually moved away, and then, or was it the force fields that made them move away? It must have been.
Yeah, he like force fielded right on top of that. I guess he didn't have an observer with that armor, with that army.
I thought he just kind of missmicroed it. Yeah, that was actually a very nice play there from Frustration, because that definitely saved the Nexus. Losing both the third and the fourth would have been a huge blow, as Frustration now does snipe the fourth of Army. I think got a couple of probes on the third. So, yeah, that turned around pretty well there for Frustration, doing some pretty good counter harassment as a result. And now Army is trying to push out. Having 6 Colossus on the field is a pretty scary number. It's a lot more than Frustration has of his own. But Frustration is looking pretty strong in the probe count. 74 against 58. That's a pretty big difference there in terms of mining.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many of those probes are actually being utilized, as the third base, or rather the fourth base, is just now going to be getting established, so we can finally get those probes back to work. However, the fourth Nexus for Army is just now going to be added on, so a fair bit behind that of his opponent. And once again, that hallucinated Phoenix from Frustration. He is on top of the scouting, at least with the hallucinated Phoenix. He actually, no, never mind. He did not see that at all. While on the left side of the map, once again, with those DTs, Army loving his DTs. He will be getting the engage there on that Nexus. However, the cannons are going to be, and the huge engagement to the Colossus, potentially getting caught way out of position as both armies are spread out all over the place. The ramps being the problem here, splitting up those armies, and of course the Colossus of Army are actually going to be getting completely annihilated. And Frustration suddenly, with a 30 army lead, going to be climbing ahead. That was absolutely devastating.
Just such a bad angle there for Army. His ground units were kind of near the Nexus, while his Colossus were completely caught out of position on the ramp. So Frustration just had free reign against the Colossus, whilst the Archon Zealots were just not helping in that engagement. And that just such a bad angle that could have gone a lot better for Army had he been in a better position.
Yeah, not quite the engagement that Army was looking for. I mean, he's currently down 40 supply in total. And I mean, some of that is definitely in the worker supply, but he's also down a fair bit in the army supply as well. So the stronger army definitely going to Frustration. That single engagement, the terrain of the map itself kind of working against Army in that he wasn't paying enough attention there. But we do have a Warp Prism going to be heading into the main base of Army. Frustration has deployed. He's not actually going to be warping anything in just yet. A couple of Dark Templar from Army are actually going to be warped in right on top of this to deal with it, potentially. That's still not doing anything.
Yep, there we go. There's DTs. Army has his own, though. We'll actually get them as they are spawning because of an Observer, I think. We are seeing a couple of Tempests, so the Starport gates transition here from Army. Tempests are going to be sniping from afar, but there's just too many units there. Those Archons are going to be enough there to kind of muscle their way through that Nexus there, even with the Photon Overcharge, killing all the Zealots. There are some Zealots being warped in from Army. I think it's going to matter, though. It's just too late. Stalkers in the back lines will kind of jump onto those Tempests, and there goes the GG. So Army 2-0 defeat. We'll get taken out of this best of 3.
Yeah, it all just pretty much came down to that one single engagement. I think that Frustration may have been a little bit ahead in terms of the army, but then just catching that army out after that, it was just downhill for Army. So everything changing in a pretty much single moment there as Frustration takes the victory. A big congratulations to him. And 2 pretty good games out of these Australian players.
Yeah. One thing I want to mention, though, as well, is, like, Frustration had pretty much entire map control. He had pylons, he had towers, so it's not surprising that he got the good engagement, because he just had so much more vision, whereas Army was basically going blind into that third base. So I guess that's one fault you could say, is Army marching in blindly on such a kind of a dangerous terrain could have been a bit of a fault of him. He maybe should have gotten an Observer to kind of scout forward just in case. But yeah, that game, that could have gone so well in Army's favour had he actually managed to snipe that third just after the fourth. But playing very well, 2 very entertaining games here. So I think that'll wrap this one up.
Indeed it will, and this is Sybert signing out.
I'm Ownage Machine. See you later, and thank you for joining me, Mr. Sybert. Very well.